Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 81. I'm recording it on February 14th, 2021. Happy Valentine's Day at 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And as always, we're going to talk about God. I've been finding in my life recently, as I've been doing these episodes, my connection with God has become much stronger because I spend 28 minutes 5 times a week attempting to talk about God, to explain God to you, to myself. And it really is a wonderful practice. So it's interesting that we can never fathom God's ways. Sometimes God seems to be doing something that is not in our interest. That we would say, no, you shouldn't do this. Pray for God to not do this. And then in hindsight, we realize that it was for our best good. And I think a perfect example of this is the Trump presidency. 4 years, that was scary, were scary. But because of these 4 years, now we can do what we need to do, and the Republicans will no longer have the power to stop us. We, the people, not the rich, not the corporations. And I mean, I've been a liberal Democrat my entire adult life. And for the last 3 decades, I've been trying to weaken the Republican Party as much as possible so we can address climate change and many other challenges that they refuse to allow us. 3 decades, and Trump comes along and does it in 4 years. A much, much better prospect we're in today than had Hillary been president after 4 years. So again, it's like God apparently, absolutely works in mysterious ways. And we need, so that teaches us to not judge, what happens to us as unfortunate. To be patient, to see how things develop, how time evolves, whatever has happened. And that's a good lesson for us to keep in mind. So, I was talking with my friend Charlie, and Andy, and I will hopefully get together in about 3 weeks to together do an episode on God. And if it works out, these are good friends of mine, so I'll have them back regularly. I just can't have Andy kind of like promoting this idea that the Bible is to be taken literally. That rods were turned to snakes and things like that, because it's a dangerous belief. It may seem innocuous to have that belief, but it's because so many people have that belief that they refuse to acknowledge our role in climate change. People have stopped trusting the science that has created the internet, has created our modern civilization, has saved so many lives that, without which we'd be back in the Stone Age. And to the extent we disrespect God's manifestation as this technology, then we put ourselves at risk. And that's what people who believe in a fundamentalist literal interpretation of the Bible represent. It's not their fault. And of course, I'd be the first to defend them. They're not having a free will, this all being God's play, God's God's play, it's amazing. But, not so we don't blame them, but, it'd be nice to get them. I'm going to try this with my friend. For example, he was quoting, he was citing two passages in Isaiah saying that Isaiah was saying that we would call a person God. Now that seemed kind of mistaken to me because, like, idolatry or just this idea that a person could become God is so antithetical to Judaism. So I searched. There was two. One was, I believe, in Isaiah 5, the other perhaps in Isaiah 9, and one of them basically, Isaiah says, well, we should call this person Emmanuel. And when my friend said it to me, he said, well, we should call this person God. And so, so I clarified this to him. I said, listen, the word Emmanuel in Hebrew means God is with us. And we will call this man God is with us, which is different than calling the person God. And then then he said, well, that's not the passage that I'm referring to. So basically, he read the other passage, and I forget, I think it's in Isaiah 9, and Isaiah is saying something like a child has been born to us that we will, whatever, I forget exactly, but the idea is like that Andy didn't recognize that Isaiah was not talking about somebody in the future, but somebody who had already been born. And so these are the kinds of mistakes in biblical exegesis that are prevalent among people who take the Bible literally. And we and I'm sounding like a preacher now, but I really should return back to God. Maybe this is what God wants me to do right now. But it is our duty to God, to ourselves, and to them to show them the error of their ways. If we notice that they're completely misunderstanding, completely misconstruing a passage in the Bible, it's important to help them better understand, help them understand a more intelligent, probable interpretation. So yeah, let's return to God, because that sounded kind of like very preachy. I mean, like, not preaching is great, but I just don't feel like preaching right now, I suppose. So let's return to what just happened with the impeachment, where McConnell says that he didn't vote to convict because he believes that the impeachment was unconstitutional. And naturally, he's suggesting that our framers would have been content, our founding fathers, with allowing the president during his last month in office do whatever he wants without any accountability. He believes that that's what our Constitution says. I think over the next several months, he's going to be shown to be profoundly, devastatingly wrong. This day will go down in infamy, and then the people who voted to acquit and who sided with Trump will be associated with that infamy. But let's set that aside, because what's happening because of that is God seems, I believe, to be moving us into what actually may be the Messianic era. Now, there are various kinds of interpretations of Talmud, of Chumash, of various scripture that say different things about who the Messiah is, Mashiach, what the person will do. And these are, in my mind, we will find out. Well, it's they're different. They're different ideas, and maybe they don't contradict each other. Maybe there will be both one person in the messianic era where perhaps we all become messianic in the sense of enlightened. There's various possibilities. But what does seem clear is that we're moving into a time like that. And I say this because, again, if you understand the politics, the Republican Party needs to now go back to the drawing board and come up with something some ideas, some helpful ideas, instead of just doing what they do, just stopping Democrats from instituting really good and necessary ideas. They'll have to come up with something helpful that doesn't prevent us from fighting climate change, that makes our world fairer and happier and healthier, rather than they're protecting business interests over the welfare of not just we living now, but future generations. And so, yeah, so that ideology is no longer sustainable. And a party that defended Trump, as they all did, I believe will soon go the way of the Whigs, because in politics there's such a thing as overreach, and there's no other way to explain it. But again, getting back to the purpose of all this, it seems that God is doing this for the purpose of forcing not just the Republicans, but the Democrats to finally take some action on what's necessary, to fight climate change, to get people jobs, to make our world fairer, to make it work better, to be sustainable. The Democrats, I campaigned for Clinton and Obama, and they both profoundly disappointed me because they both had major opportunities to advance, causes that help people, to lessen poverty, to just make life better and fairer for everyone, and neither really, they talked the talk. They really didn't walk the walk. I mean, and so now President Biden is in a position that it is untenable that he follow in their footsteps, because if he were to, we might have Trump running in 4 years, or someone like Trump. So basically, it's hard to tie this into God. Biden Biden is constrained by necessity to finally do the will of the people. And that's actually what will, win Democrats a lot of seats in 22 and the presidency, and more seats in 24, as people understand, how treasonous the Republican Party has been. That's really the point. So then the question becomes, well, what good is going to be done? And I have a feeling a lot of good has to be done, because we have no choice. I mean, like, people have to get jobs, because if they don't get jobs, they'll be out in the street homeless, spreading the COVID. The climate, the lies, the fabrications that the Trump and the media promoted, we're going to have to stop that. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater. It's illegal because it's dangerous. You can't not be a doctor and pretend to be a doctor, lie to people, say you're a doctor to try to treat them. We have laws against lying, and these laws now have to be scaled up to apply to Facebook, to Fox News, to these networks who claim they're entertainment, but they're really political vehicles. If you're going to be up on the air, especially with large audience, you have to ensure that what you're presenting is the truth. And so, how this works out, the logistics, we'll have to naturally have, I suppose, an organization, perhaps a federal department of truth. And that may sound futuristic, But if lies are so dangerous to our union, to our Constitution, then it may be that a complete federal department devoted to minimizing those lies may be necessary. But that's, that these are just some of the things to prevent, what's happening. But I think what we can look forward to, and again, to tie this in with this idea of the Messianic era, our world has a lot of problems. Climate change basically dominating them all for the next decades to come, being so serious. And the only way we're going to solve that problem, these problems, is to talk about them civilly, constructively, intelligently, to have people who actually have expertise in what they're doing take part in what we need to do. We can no longer afford to well, I think what part of the problem in politics today and how our world runs is a lot of times it's run by people who have social skills. They have charisma. They have emotional intelligence. They know how to connect to people, like Trump. But as you saw with Trump, he's just not very bright and not very good. So our politics, our government is filled with people like that, maybe not on the scale of Trump, but people who have gotten to their position because of their charisma and their personality. And so we need to now be much more diligent in vetting who gets to represent us in government. And this will bring out the best in us. We won't tolerate untruths within the Democratic Party, and we won't tolerate them within the Republican Party, whatever party perhaps replaces them, because again, they may not continue. And think of like, again, it's funny though, I keep focusing on the problem part, but then I keep on being reminded, well, imagine the goodness of a world where lying, especially to masses of people, is prohibited, across the board. What will that do? That will encourage, motivate our elected leaders to be more forthright, to be more truthful, and therefore to be far more effective. That's just, and that's one part of it. Trump created a climate of such animosity, such fear and hatred, that it seems now we're moving into this era where, because we have been so acutely aware of the tone he set for the last 4 years, we have all the motivation in the world we need to change the manner of civil discourse, of political discourse, to demand that our politicians respect each other and respect private citizens. No more insulting, calling people names, denigrating them, vilifying them. That should have no place in politics. And again, it's not a matter of free speech. You're not allowed to, by law, call a person a racist, an ethnic slur. You're not allowed to engage in hate speech. And our elected leaders should be held to a higher standard than us. We should all be civil in our discourse with each other, but by law, our politicians will need to adhere to this higher standard. That will ensure that people like Trump never get the chance to do what Trump did over the last 4 years. And again, what he did was horrible, but in the Bible it says, well, God uses evil for the purpose of good, and that's what has happened. And that's why this is such a, it's not a cloud with a silver lining. It was Trump has been a blessing in disguise. He has advanced us so much more than, again, the 4 years of the Hillary presidency would have. So much more than if he would have not been so vile and hateful and evil. So and again, look, we just basically we just went through our second civil war. That's the reality. And let's be so thankful that very few people died. Of course, no one should have died, but compared to the Civil War, where we lost thousands and thousands of people, we should be so thankful that this Civil War that just ended was non-militaristic for the most part. The first hint of militarism ended it. We ended it because we value peace, and we value compassion and kindness and goodness. And it's not to say that these protesters are bad per se, because they believed Trump's lies. They believed sincerely that the election was stolen. So in their mind, they were doing the right thing. And that's why lies are so dangerous, especially when told by the news media and our politicians. Lies can incite insurrections, can incite revolutions. So yeah, that's a good point, because again, like, part of the series is to explain, well, everything is God's will, so that the actions of Trump and these insurrectionists, the entire Republican Party, is God's will also. So the key point here is that as we change our world, as we exact justice, as we must defend our Constitution, our liberty, we must also do this in a way that uplifts the Republican Party, that shows them the error of their ways, gets them to understand, gets them to convert, to set aside personal interest for the common public good, that now is not a matter of virtue anymore. It's a matter of it's a matter of existence. It's a matter of the future. It's, with climate change, it's not an option. We must do it. So all right, again, so yeah, so as we address them, because I think there has to be a lot of discourse. Like, the first conversation our nation will probably have is to get people to understand that what Trump did was so dangerous that it can never be allowed to happen again. That's the first conversation. And it may take some Republicans a while to get there, but I think eventually they'll understand, just like everybody understands how horrible, how terrible slavery was. People will understand how horrible and terrible Trump was. And because of that, so, like, we Democrats do not tend to be bombastic, do not tend to be bellicose and aggressive in our ways. We will be firm, but we will, rather than throwing I mean, we may have to throw some sticks at Republicans. Basically, I mean, some people may either need to be imprisoned or threatened with imprisonment, whatever. There has to be deterrence to what happened. But the way we Democrats think is that, let us provide rewards, not rewards that like the Republicans do, that will benefit a small segment of the population at the expense of everyone else. But let's reward Republicans for converting, for changing their ways in ways that benefit everyone, benefit them, that they see the benefit and we all see the benefit. So this is interesting, Phil. I had no idea what I was going to talk about. at this, I just attended, I just attended an evening service, a Zoom service, religious service, Jewish service. And I think it's happened again. Each time I attend a class, a Torah class, or this time a service, and I do an episode of the show, I become impressed by it, because some of these episodes, they're all right, but some of them I think are exemplary. And I think this one is like this. This one, I believe, and actually it's a, perhaps it's a start, because I think our task now is to envision the kind of world we want to create out of this Trumpian nightmare. Our task now is to think about and talk about what we want to do, what we need to do. And my challenge, because a lot of this is simply politics, but my challenge is to connect it, to keep connecting it to God. Because to the extent we connect all of this to God, again, for example, we understand that it's all God's will. So there's no valid, it would be immoral for us to, for example, hate the Republicans and to feel vengeful in that way because they don't have a free will. So we look for answers, we defend justice, defend our Constitution, but in a way that doesn't involve the blame that this free will belief causes, when people don't understand the fundamental nature of God as being omnipotent, all powerful, that God created the world. So it's not that God can do anything, apparently. I don't think God can make 1 + 1 = 3, because this is God's law that God created, and so 1 + 1 must equal 2. But anything that happens, anything that has ever happened, must absolutely be completely attributed to God. And with that perspective, we can create a much, much better world. All right, I have about a minute left, so thanks for watching. I think I will continue with this, God willing, this thread of surmising. We may be moving into, it seems like we're moving into a messianic era that, like, for people who aren't Jewish, it's like an era where everything's going to be getting better for everyone, I believe. All right, so again, I catch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media, channel 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon, and I upload the shows to YouTube. And so yeah, this is interesting because, like, this the period we're in now that just began is categorically different than the period before, and it's going to be just really interesting to explore. Thanks for watching, and God willing,